Hello, I'm Dr. Wayne Klein. Today I'm going to be talking about temperament. Temperament is the single most important thing that you should know about your child. Trying to raise a child without understanding the child's temperament is like trying to drive a stick shift without knowing where the gears are. Yet, astoundingly, most psychotherapists have no idea about temperament, have probably never encountered it in their training. That includes psychologists, licensed mental health counselors, and social workers. I'm going to be talking about various dimensions of temperament. Now, to a certain extent, even animals, at least mammals, also have variability in these dimensions of temperament. Um, in Temperament is biological and it emerges very early in a person's life. So some studies that were done to give you an idea of how this works is they'd have a young child, usually sitting on its mother's lap, and somebody wearing a clown face could walk into the office and stand in front of the child. The more fearless child might reach out and poke the clown's nose, where the slow to warm or initially very cautious child will cringe, try to hide behind its mother, or cry. A child balanced between fearlessness and slow to warm might initially be fearful, but then they'll warm up pretty quickly and then maybe even eventually try to interact with the clown. The slow to warm child will eventually warm up, but it takes much longer. Now, there are many mistakes that parents make when they have a slow to warm child, which is beyond what I have time to talk about here. Another aspect of temperament is activity level. Now, this illustrates something very important. The couch potato extreme has a huge advantage sitting in a classroom. That child is not going to mind being sedentary all day, whereas the very active child has a huge advantage playing sports. The problem being a couch potato is it's tougher to compete athletically, and as an adult, you're going to have problems keeping active enough to maintain your physical health. Adaptability. That's how quickly we adjust to new conditions. Now, the very adaptable or flexible child is much easier to raise. They're a delight. You change the routine, they immediately adapt to it and they go along, they go with the flow. You think that's great, but there are huge advantages in some situations to being inflexible. You know the phrase, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. That's an inflexible guy who didn't adjust to the problem that he was facing ships with torpedoes heading towards him. Sometimes the very inflexible child, who, by the way, is very hard to raise, is described as very strong-willed, a strong sense of self. An advantage there is they're less likely to get in a car with a bunch of drunken teenagers and ride around if it's not their usual routine. The disadvantage is anytime there's any change, they have trouble adjusting to it. There's no good or bad temperament, but if you don't understand your child's temperament, you're going to constantly have problems. Emotional intensity. The mild-mannered child is a delight to raise until they're not. The emotionally expressive child is easy to read. You know what's going on with them. What I see constantly is the very mild-mannered child. The child with low expression of emotion is kind of like a car with no gauges, no meters. So you don't know when there's a problem. There's no warning light that's going to go on. And then all of a sudden, the child's got gastrointestinal problems or headaches, or they can't focus. Or every once in a while, they just blow up out of the blue, or they start crying inexplicably because you can't tell what's going on. If they were more emotionally expressive, teachers and parents would attend to the difficulty rather than letting it fester until it's like a car with no indication anything's wrong until there's smoke coming out from under the hood or the car stops functioning completely. Another aspect of temperament, well, before I do that, let me repeat, there's no good or bad temperament. The average temperament's like an all-season tire. It's not adapted perfectly to any condition, but you can get by most of the time. But in sleet, in snow, in an ice storm, you're much better off with a winter tire. A studded snow, preferably, but try driving a studded snow tire in the summer on dry ground. The car's going to handle terribly. And a summer tire is a perfect tire for rain and for dry ground. And try driving that in the winter. The all season is your best, it's easiest. But again, there's situations where other extremes of temperament are going to serve you much better. Mood. We all know some people see the world through rose-colored glasses and others look through a glass darkly. Some people see the glass as half full, others see it as half empty. People who look at the world through rose-colored glasses are more pleasant to be around. They're, with some exceptions, they're less likely to get depressed. The downside is they're also less likely to anticipate possible negative consequences. They're more likely to assume other people have goodwill and then they get stabbed in the back. Persistence. If your child has poor persistence, you're going to have some problems with the child when they get longer homework assignments. If they have extremely good persistence, they may persist to the point of obsessive compulsiveness where they have to get an A. They can become perfectionistic, which is probably even a worse problem. You know the story of the tortoise and the hare. The hare wasn't particularly persistent. He'd start and he'd stop, where the tortoise was so persistent that he won the race. Persistence has its place and can be extremely valuable. You have to know how to manage your child with whatever extreme of persistence they have. Distractibility. Focused attention enables us to focus on a particular task and screen out distractions, whereas global attention is dispersed attention, monitoring the entire environment. So maybe there's a fly outside the window and you're supposed to be focused on your teacher, where if you are oriented more towards global attention, you're going to be distractible. You're going to focus on that fly for a minute. Then you're going to focus on somebody else clicking their pen. You can easily see that there are reasons why we have two attentional systems, one focused and one dispersed or global. If your child is set up such that one aspect of attention dominates, there's situations where they can have problems, and there are other situations where they're going to excel. Again, knowing how to manage this is extremely useful. This is a slightly different construct, but it can seem similar. Sensory screening. The person with really, really good sensory screening tends to not notice the emotions in their friend's face when their friend is bored, when they talk and talk and talk about some subject, which, by the way, is useful if you're a teacher. They also tend not to hear when the parent asks them to do something, and they just screen it out. And parents will often get angry and think that's willful disobedience, but often it's not. It's high sensory screening in many cases. Now, the other extreme, the princess and the pea type temperament, where they're sensitive to everything. This is the child who can't handle tags on their clothes. They might get a diagnosis by sensory integration disorder. These guys are super attentive. So it's useful socially because they're going to really be attentive to what's going on. Now, you can have differences in sensory screening depending on the sensory modality. But this is just a cursory introduction here. The mismatch between parenting and temperament causes all manner of problems. The mismatch between a child and their environment, their social environment, their school environment, causes all kinds of problems and gets many people all types of psychiatric diagnoses, sets them on the path to developing lifelong patterns that are not helpful. So when you have a child with a severe mismatch between their temperament and their situation, it's like a fish out of water. Now, some children are very easy to raise, others are very difficult to raise. I heard of a study once, it was presented at the American Psychological Association annual convention, where they reported on baby apes who were very low in caution, very high in activity level, and they were basically acting like they were bad to the bone. They were very aggressive towards other baby chimps, such that the other mothers would not allow them to play with their kids. And as they got a little older, towards adolescence, they would get ostracized from the chimp group. And chimpanzees can't live on their own in the wild. So what would happen? These guys would die. They'd be eaten by an animal, or they'd starve. Some predator would get them. Well, what the researchers did is they took some of these babies who they knew from their behavior at a very young age were going to be one of these bad to the bone chimps. And they gave them a foster mother. Now, some chimpanzee mothers are super mothers. They consistently raise male babies who become the alpha male, the leader of the colony. And guess what happened when these kids, these little chimps, who normally would die in the wild because their behavior was so bad, when they were raised by the super mother, they became the leader of the colony, the alpha male. It's essential for you to understand your child's temperament and then to know how to very carefully modify any extremes. But doing that without knowing what you're doing is like opening up something where the warning says, warning, if you open this case, you invalidate the factory warranty. So if you want to learn more about your child's temperament, give me a call if you live in Massachusetts. If you're not in Massachusetts, sorry, I can't see you because arcane laws forbid that. Thank you.